How we doing, Bear Nation? This is your host, Rob Napoli, back again for another episode of the Bear Necessities podcast. And today is going to be another fun episode. I have a former pro BMX athlete on the show, Josh Perry, who is a multiple brain tumor survivor, former account executive, and he's now a health and performance coach. And he trains and coach people on kind of, we were talking pre-show, what would we say, the four aspects of energy, which is physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, which led us into a great pre-show conversation. So excited to have you on the show, Josh. Thanks for being here today, my friend.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I appreciate the time, and it's always like I said, we were talking about earlier. We've had a handful of conversations since getting connected. I think it was through our buddy Clint, if I remember correctly. And it's always a pleasure to speak with people that are on the same page, same path of growth, and just challenging one another and just seeing what's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Clint Webb, the golf networker.
Yep.
I met him through a business and bourbon event through my buddy Ronell Richards. So I love how that all kind of ties together, and it's always great to meet cool people. And I think it's really cool is that it's not often that I have a chance to interview former pro athletes on the podcast. Being a BMX athlete, I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch the BMX and was like, oh, I could do that. And like, we all got the little bikes with the Euro things. You could do the spinny bars. And like, we built a little ramp and it was like, that's about as much as my nerves of steel would allow. So before we even get into that, how did you pick up the sport of BMX biking, like competitive biking like that? I mean, was that just something that naturally happened? Was that in your family? Like, did you have a passion for that? And then I want to get into your kind of the trauma, how we overcame it, and like how that led to the amazing work you're doing now as a speaker and coach and all those things.
Yeah, so I mean, just like you described, it was just one of those things that I just got obsessed with and just took it further and further and further. But I think what exposed me to it was just the right time at the right age. The late 90s, early 2000s, action sports, the X Games came out like I think 96, 97, Gravity Games shortly after that. And so it was all over TV. Tony Hawk was blowing up, and which his HBO documentary was phenomenal.
I have it saved. I haven't watched it yet. I have it saved.
It's so sick. Just the opening and the quote he has, and it speaks to my life, being an action sports athlete. But it was just, yeah, I was, grew up Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Baseball is massive there. So from T-ball to Little League, just playing sports. My dad today at 59, turning 60 in a couple, probably by this, era, so he'll already be 60, but always playing sports, from basketball to softball to flag football to bowling to golf, depending on the season up in Massachusetts. So I was exposed to everything and I loved it. I loved being active. And then, like I said, late 90s, early 2000s, action sports started blowing up. I was rollerblading when that was still popular. I was skateboarding. And then I saw kids on bikes and I was like, man, like, that's cool. Like, in my mind, I was like, oh, this is a more efficient means of transportation. You don't have to worry about little pebbles hitting those little hard wheels and you go flying over. And I saw it on X Games and I was sold. And it was my birthday's in November. So I was turning 13. And for Christmas that year, I asked for a dirt bike because I was also into dirt bikes and was riding my cousins every weekend. And my parents, they couldn't afford a dirt bike. So they got me the next best thing, which was a BMX bike. And that's where it started. And then coming into my freshman and sophomore year of high school, all the other school sports started to just dissipate. I actually didn't make the school basketball team my freshman year of high school, and that's what started it. And then I started excelling in local amateur contests to regional to national. By the time I was in my junior year, I was competing professionally, dropped out of high school to support my parents, and just moved down to North Carolina to train with the late great Dave Muir and the other guys that were living out there, and just took off.
I mean, one, that kind of is amazing to me, but two, also that it happened so much later. I feel like a lot of these, when I look at BMX athletes, they are kind of the X game athletes. They started younger when they had no fear, right? Like you see kids today, like the joy of, skateboarding or snowboarding down a mountain. But I think when you kind of hit that 13 is when we start kind of going through puberty and you start, your fear factor starts sitting in that you're not as indestructible. And as you kind of started this journey of being a competitive athlete in the BMX circuit, and it got really, like, it pushed really fast to do big tricks, right? So how did that affect your mentality? Were you ever scared of getting hurt? Like, talk to me a little bit about your mentality of like putting yourself out there, in a very real way to like take a jump and like hurt yourself. You know what I mean? Like that affect you at
Yeah.
all as you were kind of going through high school and kind of going like I remember I playing football. Yeah, I mean I put my body through a lot and beaten up, but it was also like you started to feel everything differently. You weren't that 7-year-old kid that's gonna knee and like be up running the next minute. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was added to that, there was the other element of being seen by my peers, doing something that was unconventional, untraditional, and, not what the majority was doing. And then also YouTube came out, what, 2005, 6, 7 or something like that. So like then, my friends and I filming videos, which we'd always been doing, and then putting them on the internet. And one of the main ways I got into the global BMX scene and developed a presence for my riding was a video contest that came out in 2007 with Haro Bikes and then the BMX website. They combined to create this contest globally, and top 10 videos got picked to go out to North Carolina, where I ended up moving to in Greenville to audition essentially. And they're going to pick one out of the 10 to be on the team. And so there was the other elements of like, being judged by your peers. What if I fail? I'm putting myself out there on the internet. And it was much easier to gain attention on YouTube back then because it wasn't as flooded as it is today. And just, videos were taken off. One of my first videos, it was 5 seconds and it had like 40,000 views. And at the time I was like, oh, I don't know what this is, but, so there was many layers to it. And I think there's two components that come to mind of why or three, that I was able to overcome that and pursue what I wanted. One was, my mom always tells a story when I was, a couple years old. I don't recall, maybe like 4 or 5, where I just went down the driveway on a tricycle, and at the end just like jackknifed and they jumped off and yelled bail, or I'd always jump off counters and just like catch me midair. Like always had that adrenaline seeking aspect, which now as an adult I've learned that's a component of ADHD and dopamine seeking. But there was that, and then the conditioning from sports, and then my family, to work at something that I want to do. And then, the level that you put in is the level you'll get to essentially. And then that leads to the third, which was that vision I had in my mind, that, all that conditioning leading up to those moments where I was like, I want to do this jump or this trick. It was the vision that propelled me over the fear. And I think that was something that I love about action sports specifically, but any pursuit for a passion, whether it be it'd be dance, it'd be, art, it'd be business, it'd be anything that you can get better at. If you put your everything into it, it teaches you these things about how to regulate your emotions and focus. And that's essentially what I learned at a young age I wasn't aware of, that I'm gifted with now, as consciously. But it was just, here's what I have going on. What do I want? Okay, let's focus on what do I need to do to obtain what I wanted. So I had what I call virtual mentors that I later became friends with, and training partners and competitors with, posters on my wall. I was watching videos every day, reading their articles in the magazines and everything I could to study them as a model of success for me. And so I didn't know I was doing this, but I was like, okay, I want to be like them one day. What do I need to do? I need to compete. I need to film videos. I need to send in sponsor me tapes on VHS tapes back then. I need to do demos. I need to get exposure. And so when it came to the tricks, yeah, it's real. The pain hurts, but you get up. Hopefully you're conscious. You get up, you try again because of the vision you're working towards. And that has been the single most important thing, if I had to pick one, that has helped me throughout my life and all the aspects, whether it be health challenges, financial challenges, starting a business, getting through the pandemic, like all these different things. It's that focus on the vision and what does it take to accomplish what you want.
Yeah, I love that. And so as we kind of go along with your journey, you became you got noticed and found. You moved to North Carolina, and started getting into the circuit, and then that's when things kind of went sideways. So would you mind, you had some trauma as a rider, which kind of found out to be your accidental kind of diagnosis. So you want to walk us through like what was that moment like when you were no stranger. That's why I was asking about this fear thing, right? Is you were
Yep.
no stranger to you knew you could get hurt, and then you had something happen. So why don't you share with us kind of that moment or that experience, because it's kind of what changed your life into who you
100%.
are today, right?
100%. And that's the thing that I got from Tony Hawk's documentary, was like, injuries were never a goal. They were just an embrace, unconsciously accepted part of the journey. The goal was to land the trick to win the contest, but we embrace pain at a very high, consistent level that most people will never fathom on a choice basis. And so the timeline, I turned pro in 2007, 2006 or 7, when I was in my junior year. My graduating year was going to be 2007. So I think it was 2006 I turned pro, competing in the Dew Tour and things like that. And my first pro win was 2009 in April. So that was the most amazing point of my career at that time. And moving forward into March in the off season of 2010, I was trying a variation of a new trick in the foam pit. And back then, we didn't have the specific ramp setup. We didn't have like the training ramp that we have now is like a transition between foam and real ramp, which is essentially a ramp with foam blocks and then some thin plastic so it gives so you can land, and they rough it up so your tires don't slip. We didn't have that for this setup back then. So it was foam pit. I did it 10 times in a row perfect, and I went and tried on the real ramp. Out of fear of under rotating the flip and the spin of the trick, I overcompensated all of them. Got ejected off my bike when I landed because I landed, if I was supposed to land like this, I landed sideways and got sent over and hit my head and got knocked out. And that led to the MRI that I talked to you about before we were talking or recording, that I got an accidental death sentence. The diagnosis was actually found of a brain tumor, or I should say the brain tumor was actually diagnosed because of the MRI for the concussion. And so I was driving there thinking, I gotta get this MRI, getting the results, maybe worst case scenario, 2 weeks more off the bike could be worse. And it got much worse. And I was by myself. Like I said, I moved there when I was 17, from my family, living with my friends, doing all my thing, and got this death sentence essentially on accident, thinking I was going to get an MRI checkup, look for swelling or bleeding, classic TBI symptoms. And that's where the journey started, where I had to actually reflect on who I was, what I was doing to that moment. And it started out very real of like victim. Like I literally asked my doctor out loud, what did I do to deserve this? Am I a bad person? Why is this happening to me? And then it was a week and a half between diagnosis and surgery, and something shifted in me. And I related to Lance Armstrong's story, another cyclist, which was unfathomable at the time to find that connection, brain, lung, and testicular cancer. He overcame it. I could model that. Like that gave me hope and faith that I could do this. My mom's story of battling colon cancer, alive and well today. I was like, oh, I'm a part of her. Like this, I can do this, And then the BMX community globally, whether they had met me or not, heard my story and saw my riding and gave me their support. And I started to shift from what if I don't wake up to what will I do differently when I wake up, because I got myself in a situation, I need to make some changes. And it started with nutrition. And then it moved into a couple of years later, I blew up my knee to, physical strength and fitness. And then the mindset piece came last. And it made sense of this entire journey of who I was and who I was becoming, thanks to the conditioning of BMX and all the things that I've been going through with injuries, the brain tumors, not one, not two, not three, but I think I'm on the eighth one now. But all of that is what led me to my success. And then, like you mentioned earlier, it led me to discovering a higher purpose than just getting back up and riding my bike, which people loved. But there was a deeper reason why they loved that. And it was because it was inspiring them the ability to fall down and get up and work towards something that you want, because you believe in it that much that you're willing to go through the shit to get there. And that's when I started to work on, creating a coaching business and how to help people do the same thing rather than retiring and getting a job doing something I didn't like. I wanted it. I still bust my ass to make this business work, because it's not about me. It's about the people I can inspire and help them improve their lives. The way I had to learn was hard way, out of pain and suffering. And I learned people can, they can change from a place of joy and inspiration with, it just takes a little bit of perspective. So I had the pleasure and the gift of using my story as a learning lesson, as well as, we learn by story. So I can tell my story with the knowledge and expertise I have to back up what we're working on, and they can make the changes themselves and start to witness it moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting. There's you know, the coaching profession is it's very unique, right? Business coaching, life coaching, mental health, optimization. There's all these different branches, and I think it's really easy to study something and teach it. It's different if you've gone through it, and it kind of brings a little bit of a different flavor and uniqueness to be able to tell the story and not only tell it but also show it, right? Like I think so many people go to a coach. I've talked about this on episodes before. Sometimes people want to go to a coach to get the answer, right? And it's like that's not what a coach is for. A coach is there to help guide you, ask questions, drive you, and push you in the right direction, right? Because at the end of the day, a coach can help give you a playbook, but they can't make you compete, right? Look on any major sports team. I always use Andy Reid. Andy Reid has a great team put in place with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's a great coach, one of the world's best. But at the end of the day, he's not out there competing. There's 11 guys on the field that are competing for the win, right? And he could do everything in his power to will them to victory, but at the end of the day, he can't. Right? There has to be the collective unit, the individual contribution of every person, the collective unit of the team. if you look at people in daily lives, they get coaches because they're looking for a magic bullet or an answer. And I think it's really important for people to understand that that's not what it's about. And I love how you share that kind of joint inspiration, because I talk about internal and external motivation. External motivation can help fuel the fire, but the fire has to be burning inside of you. Like the warmth, the heat has to come from the fireplace inside. Otherwise, you'll burn out. Like you'll never sustain. And a coach could help you find, fan, and grow that flame inside. And so I like how you talked about that kind of joint inspiration and providing the optimization piece to it. So as you kind of went through your journey in building this business and kind of doing these things, what were what were kind of core values or foundation principles that when you were like, all right, I'm going to start my own business and leverage these things, what were the kind of foundational principles that you wanted to build a business around? What was the brand of Josh Perry? Because it changed, right, from being the kid that got discovered to the validated athlete to, you know, kind of the victim to survivor. What was, when you launched the Josh Perry brand in the new age with the coaching, what was the foundational belief that you had?
The belief I had that was if I can overcome, then other people can too. And so with that is why I share so openly, authentically, and vulnerably all the different aspects and layers of my life, whether it be, the things I've gone through or, the loss through suicide of Dave Mira, a good, idol of mine and mentor and friend and training partner, as well as my younger brother, things like that. And it was at first it was weird to share those things because of my own insecurities. But as I worked through that with another coach of mine, I learned that the more I shared at the depth in which I did, the more people heard and connected with what I was sharing and would thank me because it allowed them the permission that they could share too, or they could, move on in their own way and heal. And so I make it a very intentional point of mine to be just open and transparent about everything. And that, leading into the point you made about coaching, yeah, my job ultimately is to lead, is to push people out of their comfort zone to change. And I consider it, and I tell all my clients, it's a do with process. I'm not going to give you the answers. I'm going to have you earn the answers the same way I had to go through it, but in a much shorter time. And that's why I don't like doing the, one call a week type thing, or it's like I tell my clients, I match you with where you show up. The level of commitment and action that you put into this, I'll match you there. But I'm not going to give you the answers. I'm going to make you work for it in a, positive way, because I'm not doing my job. I'm actually enabling them by just, hey, you want to know what the answer is? Here it is. Like, no, I'm going to share, but you also have to show me some action that you're taking. Otherwise, what we're doing is not going to do anything, because you're going to resort back to your old habits. And that's something I've learned in my own way, going to a coach thinking, oh, they're going to give me the answer, they're going to give me the blueprint, and I just going to plug in. Some of it is that, some of it is education, but it's also about accountability and implementation. And so that's why I've created a do with process with my clients and I, because essentially I'm just saving them time and pain and suffering. But I'm not just giving them the answer. And I learned that the hard way, whereas like I actually talked to my friend I mentioned to you earlier of connecting you with, Isaac. He's been on my podcast. We did an episode called Cheerios Coaching. And he talked about before, same thing I went through, these insecurities of like, I need to be validated. I need to give them all of my knowledge now. Why aren't my clients getting results? We're bombarding them with so much information, they don't know what to do. Rather than that, he explained the Cheerios coaching concept. He's like, what do you get whether you give a kid a box of Cheerios at their dinner plate, or their plate in general? We don't have to talk about dinner. That goes everywhere. But if you give them one at a time, they eat it and it doesn't go on the floor. I mean, 9 times out of 10, hopefully they'll go in their mouth and not on the
Every
floor.
once in a while they'll throw it, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, and like he and I both had similar realizations of like, oh, there's a process to this, there's an art to this. And if we're just giving them information, they're not doing anything with it, and we don't have systems in place to entail or to check in and ensure that they're doing the work, we're just giving them stuff and they're not even doing it. We have no purpose in this. We're not affecting change in the way we want to. So building my brand is all about being transparent, authentic, but also about challenging people. And back to the transparency part, my fiance is probably my most challenging accountability partner I have, which is one of the biggest things that we love about each other, but also the people I put in place, the people I invest into with as my coach, things like that. So I really think there's a difference between theory and experience and application. And one of the things I tell my clients is knowledge isn't shit without implementation. Knowledge isn't power. You have to do something with it to be empowered with it.
Absolutely. And I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head, because I have very strong feeling on this. So like, I understand that, not the best coaches were not always good players of the game, right? And sometimes the best players are not always good coaches, and I truly believe that. And that's like same thing with like coaches in every aspect. Not every
Well, Michael Jordan said he's a terrible coach, but he's one of the
yeah,
greatest, if not the greatest,
exactly
basketball player.
right. And so like, for me, it comes down to when I look at especially coach like the coaching industry of like health and wellness and all these different things. I have a coaching business for entrepreneurs, and I have my own mental. I have a mindset coach. I have a therapist. Like I have all these different things in my life that I work through. And the thing is that we live in an information age. We can find anything and everything you want on the internet, and so everyone throws out this like, "Oh, do this, do this. I'm a coach. Do this, do this," and it's like, yeah, we're overloading people, but nothing. Like the big difference is, are you willing to put into action? And I interviewed Dr. Carla Fowler, who is a performance high performing habits coach, right? She works with like leaders and blah blah blah. We were talking about it, and the difference is, it's in the action. It's in the small, bite sizable chunks of like being able to do it. And she talked about a 90-90-90 rule. 90% of people don't start. And then after that, the people that do start, 90% don't continue. And then after that, 90% don't improve.
Mm.
Right. And it's like the difference between you and the top 1% is action, it's doing. And so I love that you talk about the do with mentality, the do with philosophy, because that is important as a coach or somebody who's working with a coach to have that person to help inspire action. For all those out there listening, at the end of the day, you can want whatever you want in the world. What are you willing to actually do? What are you willing to work for? What actions are you willing to take? And I think that's such a great philosophy that I love that do with. That to me is I wrote it down. I was like, do with philosophy. I really love that. I have to use that
Yeah,
use that in the
I love
future.
knowing that. And I think the quote that comes to my, the concept, I can't remember the quote, and it's either by Alan Stein Jr. or James Clear in Atomic Habits. But either way, what the point they're getting at is the different the difference between people that succeed, like LeBron James, Michael Jordan, and those that wish they succeeded, wasn't the goal; it was the actions. And so I think that was actually either one of them. It's both on brand for both of them. Two people I really look up to, and I love their work. But if you think about it, we can all set goals. It's not like someone's meant to succeed or not. I wasn't meant to ride my bike at the level I did. Other people were much more skilled than I was. But when I turned 16, when we all turned 16 and got our licenses, I saw that as an opportunity to get better and to go more places. They saw it as an opportunity to go do whatever they did. And so when I was 16 or 15, 16, something around there, I have friends that told me my level of progression just skyrocketed. When I put myself somewhere where I wasn't the best anymore, being around the champions and the heroes of mine, like Dave Meir, Ryan Nyquist, Rob Darn, you name it, all the guys there in one town, I had the most progression in my life in those 2 first years I lived there, because my baseline had to rise to their lowest performance level, because they were outperforming me on a level that I didn't fathom. And so, with Atomic Habits, I listened to one of James Clear's episodes on a podcast, and the quote that really stands out to me, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'm going to just try to paraphrase the best I can. What is it? It's not we don't create our destiny. We choose our habits, or we create our habits. Our habits create our destiny. Something like that. But it's getting to the point, like, it's all about what you put in and the level of effort and intentionality, as well as, being realistic to the outside world and what's going on. Like, and one of my friends, he always uses the quote. He's like, my 80-year-old grandmother can't set a goal to be in the NBA and just work her ass off at it. It's not realistic in that sense. So there is some self-awareness we have to have, but yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. It's like, do you eat an elephant? How do you eat an elephant? The whole thing, or one bite at a time, right?
Yep.
Like, and we know that it's such a simple thing to think about, but for many people out there, it's hard to put that into like, okay, what does that mean? How do we put that into an action? Who do we have that can hold us accountable? How do we leverage accountability partners? How do we leverage people in our lives to hold us accountable to the things that we want? Because anything that's really worth getting or achieving or going after, it's not going to be fucking easy,
No.
right? Like, at the end of the day, it's not. So what are you willing to work for? I think that it should be like, what do you want? And then what are you willing to work for?
Mhm.
Because sometimes what people want, they're not willing to work for. And that's clearly going to be like something that's never going to be achievable, attainable. So I like how you share that. And I love, I think I have ADHD and OCD. So sometimes creating new habits are hard as fuck to do. But the difference is too, not that I do it every day, but my intention is to do it every day. And so that when that intention is there, you never forget that that's a goal of yours. That's a habit you're trying to form. And so maybe you don't do it 365 days a year, but you do it 300. That's 300 more than 200, more than 100, more than zero, right? Or just giving up because, oh, I didn't do it 365 days. I'm just going to give up on it. It's like, no, the intention is always there for me to do this thing. And as long as I do it more often than I don't, I'm going to continually build towards that because I can appreciate those wins and realize when I fail.
Yeah, I mean, I think the intentionality is everything, and it goes back to one of my favorite books, Atomic Habits by James Clear. He talks about it's not about perfection; it's about consistency and just a majority. It's like every action you take in your day is like a vote towards the type of person, the life you want to have. It's not about 100% or nothing. It's just about that 51% at the very least. It's about the majority vote, and that looks differently every day. Maybe some days you give 40, maybe other days you give 90, but it's about staying consistent. And that's another concept that I've had to work through my life is consistency over perfection. I didn't get where I got to in BMX because I was perfect. I failed and failed and failed over and over again, but I got up and I perceived, or what's the word? Persisted because of what I wanted to accomplish, and I learned and I reframed those falls as not failure, but what could I have learned from this? What did I do wrong? Go back to video and all those things, and I just made small tweaks. And I love it was Michael Phelps that had this quote, and him and Justin Thomas were doing this Under Armour special on YouTube of like golf meets Michael Phelps, something like that, and they were talking about high performance and habits and things like that. And he said something like high performance is nothing other than a bunch of small habits build upon each other to get you to that point where you're prepared for the moment. Something like that. And it's just like it's this idea of like when you're competent, you create confidence in your actions, not the other way around. And we have to focus on we have to start with the goal in mind. What do we want? But we can't just look at the scoreboard and expect points to get there. We have to play the game. And I think that if people can reframe the times they fall down or mess up and not look at it as failure, but like look at it as a learning opportunity, it's not easy because you have to be seen. You have to show yourself. You have to actually put yourself out there. But I think that's the number one thing that stands in the way of people getting to where they want is getting to embrace that comfort zone or that discomfort zone. And we get so attached to the familiar because it's known, it's safe, and the brain perceives it as that. But what helps me is learning how the brain works, and I can set up my life and boundaries with certain things and parameters that keep me on track, like rewarding myself. I want to go golf, for example. Okay, well, what do I need to do today? Let's get that done and reward myself with it. So it creates a positive feedback loop that makes me actually enjoy the process, which I reflect in BMX. I was obsessed with the process. I was obsessed with training every day, drilling tricks into my brain on a regular basis, do 100 times a day. And then I look at different aspects of my life now, leaving that area of life, and I'm like, what is the difference? Oh, I'm not embracing the process because it's new. And I had to go through a lot of, imposter syndrome and all that bullshit when I'll be 6 days. Yeah, 6 days from now, it'll be 3 years since I touched my bike. I rode at a professional level for 3 years after, just didn't compete because I didn't know what else to do with my life. I was still speaking and coaching, but I was just lost. And I think that there's so many elements to this. It's like, and that's why I said before we started recording, is like, I'm a big proponent of like, in order to change and to do something different, you have to know who you are and what you're currently doing. And I think that if we can start there, have self awareness and have accountability partners, that's the first domino to fall over.
Yeah. So I love that you shared that because, everyone, I do a lot of work in branding. I work with a lot of companies, right? And, most branding experts are going to, the first thing that you see when you like a branding workshop or seminar is you see a slide by Simon Sinek, right? The old
Yeah.
start with why. While that makes sense and that was good at the time, I think it's bullshit because the first thing you need to do is start with where you are today. Where are you today and who are you today? And then because a lot of times we try to figure out, well, what is our why? I don't know what your why is. What are you doing now? Where are you today? Who are you today? What has led you here? Be where you are, where your feet are. Understanding that allows you to then create your why. Because, like, oh, I'm here because of all these things. Now, this is what I want, and this is what I'm willing to work for. Okay, now we have a framework to build our why. Sometimes we just like go straight to the why and we forget to think about where the fuck we are.
Yeah. 100%.
And I think I like that you share that because, like, you being who you are today is nothing without understanding where you came from. and what things happen to you in your life to be able to lead you to that. And that's why I asked you, like, what is your foundation? What is the brand of Josh Perry built on? Because the brand of Josh Perry today is very different than it was when you were 16 competing in BMX, right? And it's
Yep.
cool to hear and see that. And that's what, I really like that we talked about this pre-show, and I want to kind of transition into this on the back half of this is, talking about these four aspects of our energy, right? We've talked a lot about your journey, persistency, creating habits, creating action, doing, right? Once we start getting into that, you share these with me. I really like it. The four aspects of our energy are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. How do we break that down? So if one's thinking about leveraging kind of their performance and optimization, and we're looking at the four aspects of our energy, why don't you break it down for us a little bit? How do you kind of coach or teach on that?
Yeah, and this goes nicely with the whole like you got to be on purpose. Your purpose has to be to serve and all this stuff. And it's like it could be true, but if you're someone that is stressed out and you feel like you're drowning every day, how can you fathom trying to help other people? And it's like the oxygen mask analogy. You have to focus on yourself. You have to take care of yourself so that way you're not passed out and actually creating more problems for other people trying to get to safety. And I learned that. And my friend again, Isaac, he shared this concept with me in 2017. He's like, man, like your story is like one of off self on purpose. It took me being on self, like focusing on self, getting out of survival mode to be equipped to actually look around and see who I could help now that I'm breathing and I'm not drowning anymore. And so I think that that's really important is we have this negative stigma of focusing on yourself as selfishness. And it's like, it's bad, it's wrong in this society. It's like, no, it's actually necessary because going back to those four components of energy, if any one of those is less than par, you're going to be robbing them from the other areas. And then you're not going to be shown as your best self and you're going to make decisions or you're going to act or say things you don't really mean or want to. That's going to create negative consequences in the long run. And it's not going to serve your purpose. And so when we look at those four elements of energy, we could take the spiritual one and we can tackle that first. And it's like spirituality could be religion. It could be spirituality in terms of yoga, meditation, or the divine feminine, the universal energy, whatever it is that gives you purpose in life and meaning to what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so when we talk about purpose, or when I talk about purpose, I'm really talking about the person. Like what is it that you believe about your life? What is it you want to do? What is your purpose for why we're on this call or doing whatever we're doing or what you're doing in your life? And that's what we can look at like spirituality is like the spirit, like the main intention that comes to us comes from above us, whatever that looks like for you, God, the universe, energy, quantum physics, doesn't matter. It's beyond you.
Yeah, above and
And
around us, man. Like that the law of attraction. And I just want to interject here because you said this, and I love it, and it's something that I share to people all the time, especially when people are like, "Oh, it's selfish not wanting to be a parent right now," and I'm like, "No, what's selfish is that if I have a kid when I'm not ready, like." And that's one example, but I truly believe in the power that you need to be selfish before you can be selfless.
yeah,
Because if you do not fill your cup up, how can you fill up others? If you're selfless without being selfish and you're filling everyone else's cup at the expense of yours, at some point there will be a negative net effect in your life, right? You
yeah,
have to be able to fill up your own cup. And so I talk about you need to be selfish before you can be selfless. Fill up your cup so that you can fill others. And that to me is like, that's why I talk about this, like the spirituality, the energy that's all around us. It flows. Sometimes it could be a call like this where I maybe not be 100% energy, but you're the one filling my cup up so that I can then in turn fill the podcast up. Right.
yeah.
And like, that's the beauty of that spirit, of that energy that flows.
Yeah, no, I love that, and that's a good I guess reminder that often people are projecting their own insecurities and fears onto us by saying X, Y, and Z, and that's their shit. It's not ours. It could be true if we believed it, but like you said, I'm in a similar position. It's like it'd be irresponsible for me to have a child when I am not in the place that I want to be in any which aspect of life that is what I'm focusing on right now. And my fiance and I have this conversation and we're getting to the point where we're actually getting excited and talking about that possibility one day, but it's actually, yeah, that's their shit you know so that's something to consider, is also like the information that people are sharing with you, is it a projection of their own shit or is it actually true? And that's the difficult part about having accountability people in your life and people that challenge you and push you, and is really getting into that level of auditing, like, oh, like, is there some truth to this? Because there's a shadow side to everything. Like, not everything's just good and great. There is a downfall to whatever aspect of life we're talking about. So yeah, back to those levels of energy. We have the spiritual part, and if we're not feeling fulfilled in our life and that like we're contributing to society, that's going to drain us. Same thing with physically. If we're not exercising or eating well, pushing our boundaries to build the capacity, opposed to what people think, exercise, it will take some energy, but it's going to build your capacity to withstand stress in your life, which leads into the mental piece. If you're mentally stressed with your to-do list, your responsibilities, your pressures, or this or that, you're going to be, stealing energy from other parts of your body, and then you're going to get burnt out. And goes to the emotional piece. If you don't feel like you're supported with people, your coworkers or your family, your friends or whatever, like energy vampires of any kind, or you just feel like you're giving and giving and you're not ever getting anything back, like that's going to drain you as well. So that's why I do what I do in the sequential order I do it with my clients, is really getting down to the first piece, which is auditing their life and going through different exercises to figure out and quantify for them what needs to change. I hear what you want, but to your set of questions earlier, what I love sharing when I'm presenting is a 4 set of questions. What do you want? Okay, what do you need? What's okay? What do you want? What do you need? What's holding you back from attaining those things? And what are you going to do about it? So we can start with the auditing phase, or the auditing protocol, as I call it. We get to quantify it for that person. What do they want? What do they need? What's holding back? What needs to change? And then we can move into the mindset piece and really distill who they are, what got them to the point where they're at, where they like, oh, I need to change this. What about you got you there? And that's the point. And the part of change that's really challenging is accountability, is ownership. It's not playing the victim role like, oh, it's their fault, it's that fault. No, it's you. Literally everything in your life to this moment is you're responsible for. Things happen. I've gone through it. Things happen out of our control. But your decision to blame it on other things and other people, rather than, okay, here's what it is, what can I do to get over it? That's the very thing that's holding you back from what you want. Once we get through that, we understand, your code, what you're operating from. We have this $1 billion biological computer that is our brain, and we can get the owner manual for it. We can reprogram it. We can pull out what doesn't serve us anymore and reprogram it. And that's a whole other conversation of limiting beliefs that were instilled and installed, all this stuff from childhood that we modeled and observed and all that bullshit. But once we get in there, then we can figure out how to lay the foundation for what we actually want to achieve based on our needs, our values, our priorities. And then we can continue to take it up a level, which is the 4th protocol I have, which is optimizing. It's optimization. But you have to know who you are and why and what's causing you to be in the situation that you want to change any element in your life. And if you don't attach that to something valuable in your life, not just like, I value respect or this or that, like, no, you may value golf. I know I do. My friend Clint Webb, the golf networker, values golf, but it's different components of our life. Once we can attach what we want to do, what we need to do to a value, then that lays the foundation for how, which could be nutrition, it could be exercise, it could be more mindset stuff, it could be whatever you want. It just depends on what you actually need. And that's why that audit piece is so important for me and my clients, because that's what it was for me. The brain tumor, when I was 21, the first brain tumor, is really what slapped me in the face, or I should say punched me in the face. It was like, you need to take an audit of your life. And that's what helped me focus on what will I do differently when I wake up. And that led me to where I am today.
I love it. Oh, that was awesome. I think it's such the hardest part about all this is that audit piece. It's looking in the mirror and having that conversation not only with yourself but with your coach, but really at the end of the day with yourself of what is it that I value, what am I willing to work for, why do I want it, and what am I willing to do about it, right? And that's hard. That is probably one of the scariest conversations you can fucking have with yourself as a human being. And sometimes it takes needing somebody to help you go through that because it is scary. It is painful. It is emotional, right? Because you have to answer yourself. I mean, you can't lie to yourself. You can try to trick yourself, right? Getting into the whole limiting beliefs. But at the end of the day, you can't lie to yourself. And for many of us out there, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to deal
Yeah.
with. And it's something that I even struggle with. I built a coaching business that I decided I didn't want. And I've transitioned that more into the things that I love to talk about, brand and entrepreneurship. And in that I coach and in that I do these things, like I'm a natural coach. Like it's hard to get that out of me to want to. But at the same point, I've gone through the process of knowing what I don't want and have an idea of where I want to be with my career, my life, my goals, my passions, my values, my core beliefs, right? And I know what my limiting beliefs are. And, I have my mindset coach, my therapist, that I'm working on overcoming my limiting beliefs, but that takes time. I wish I could say it was linear. I wish I could say, I did 3 sessions with a coach and fucking next thing you know, I'm overcoming everything.
Yep.
I have 36, 35, I'm turning 36 years. I have 35 years of program beliefs, right?
Yep.
Takes time to reprogram. While you can do it, it takes time. And I think everyone out there needs to understand that this process takes time. It's not going to be without its setbacks, and just like life, right? Like we look at your journey, you were on the up and up. You had amazing things ahead of you as a BMX professional. And who knows what could have happened if that fateful day never happened? Who knows if how long your career would have been, or like what you would have served on this earth if you had never found that diagnosis. But the thing about it is that you're able to overcome and adapt, and now spreading a message and a belief and opportunity to help others overcome. And that in itself, you never know where it's going to take you. As long as you keep putting one foot in front of the other and aren't afraid to put yourself out there, you'll be surprised at what you can accomplish in this life. And I think that you sharing that your kind of your protocol and the 4 aspects it really opens and gives me energy to think about that, and how we can push through that. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I know we could probably talk for hours. In fact, like our first call was supposed to be about business for 30 minutes. And we chatted for like an hour and a half. So I appreciate you for coming on. How can my followers, how can Bear Nation find you? Where can they connect with you if they want to learn more, connect with you, Josh? Where do they do so? What are the places to find you?
For sure. And first, I want to say thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure speaking with people like yourself. And like I said, I already have so many people I want to connect you with that I think you'll get energy from speaking with them about the various things that they do and have done in their lives, and vice versa. And something I want to say too before I talk about where people can find me is something I've learned is change is uncomfortable. It's not easy. It creates an unpredictable condition for the mind, and the mind's job is to design a safe, predictable condition, which is what the ego does. It tries to protect us at all costs. A lot of it as we get older is bullshit. It's perceived threats from our past conditioning. And so what I love to share and what I would argue is change is a lot fucking easier when you don't have a brain tumor, when you're not diagnosed with a death sentence, and you can actually change because you want to, you're not forced to. And that's my whole objective with what I do and why I share all the different elements I do, is because it took a brain tumor when I was 21 years old, living beyond whatever imagined fathomable in my dream as an X Games athlete, riding with my heroes and mentors, to change. And that first piece was starting with auditing and reflecting on who I was that was conditioning me to be in that very moment. With all those changes came this moment with you and I'm super grateful for it. Led me to Clint, which came from another person I connected with who's a great friend as well. So it's a beautiful thing when you start to embrace change and the discomfort that comes from it, because what's on the other side? And that's another thing I love sharing is like all the resistance bound up in change, and like why we're so resistant to changing is the energy of what we have to break through to get to the other side. Otherwise, everyone would be doing it if it was that easy. And I know it's a cliche saying, but it's so true. And so that's just something I love to share is like, you can change when you're inspired to rather than being forced to. And I would argue 99% of people won't have to go through what I've gone through to realize, okay, maybe I do need to change my ways if I want to stay alive.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love you sharing that. I appreciate you sharing that with us, and I am very appreciative of you being open about your journey, man. Like it's not always easy, to talk about those things, and seeing some of the people that you rode with and called friends and mentors, and have to go through, seeing them take their own lives and dealing with that as a friend, right? And that's why it's important for everyone listening that if things are bothering you or there's things causing pain, talk to somebody about them. And if anything else, I'm sure that you would say the same thing, but come talk to me, right? Like the first step is to take action and just talk about it, because there's a lot there, and there's a lot of resources. So I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, man. Yeah, like I said, it hasn't always been easy to share, and it most certainly wasn't the beginning. I just felt compelled to through the BMX media. That's how it started, and then that transformed to mainstream media and things like that, which is what led me to what I do today on all the mediums possible. I willingly share, but at first there was a lot of shame, there was a lot of embarrassment, a lot of like, oh, like I'm going to look weak because, and I still today I battle that thought that my brain tries to run of like, are people going to want to hire me when I'm going through? I just went through radiation treatment last week for recurrence after awake brain surgery the year before. And I'm good. Like I'm chilling, but it's just a part of my journey. And that's the thought that keeps coming up. Like, like who's going to want to hire me but I'm fucking good. Like I live I live and walk my talk, and it's just part of life. And I would argue that everyone's got challenges in their own ways. And here's me speaking to myself out loud, but that's why I share, because ultimately I think at the end of the day, like I said before, I want people to have an inspiring perspective shift, but also I don't want people to feel like they're alone, they're weird, they're broken, they're, whatever. They are who they are, and we all go through these things. It just looks different in the micro. So, I really appreciate you having me on and having the opportunity to chat with you and to share. And yeah, I mean, the best place to find me is just my website, joshperrybmx.com. All my social handles, whatever platform it is just at Josh Perry BMX. But I'm most active these days on LinkedIn. So, yeah.
Well, I'll make sure to drop the website and the LinkedIn link into the show notes. So if you are interested in connecting with Josh, learning more, following his journey, go to the show notes, click on it, take you right to where you need to go. Josh, thank you again for joining and sharing and having this great conversation. I know I appreciate it. Bear Nation appreciate it. So thank you so much, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Bear Nation, until next time, as always, stay well and rise up. Bear Nation, thanks for listening to the bare necessities of entrepreneurship. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review.